All right, we will go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. I am Emily Carson. I am the head of school here at Harlem Hebrew, and it is an honor and a privilege to get to kick off this time together tonight and to talk more about pre-K and what pre-K looks like this year at Harlem Hebrew. And I know folks have had a lot of questions and have been waiting so patiently, and so we're really excited to spend some time together this evening. And Roger, if you could go to our next slide, please. Our agenda tonight is pretty straightforward. We want to get right into our most updated reopening plan and really get into the specifics of what you and your child can expect when we return to school and address some of those questions we've already received, as well as some of those that might come up during this time. Additionally, we also are really excited to introduce our two pre-K teachers, and we'll give them a moment to shine in just a moment. And we'll just say, we have offered sort of a choice for pre-K of if you would like your child to be physically in the building or if you would like to be remote, and that choice was really important to us as a school, because we want you to do what is best for your child and your family. And some households have particular challenges in keeping their children at home, while others face greater risk of sending their children to the school due to the health of one or more household members, or any number of reasons, honestly. And we understand that this was a difficult decision for a lot of folks to make. And so we hope tonight to really just provide you with information about what your child will experience in remote pre-K and what your child will experience physically in the building. And we know both options will be really exciting and phenomenal. And we're exciting for leadership from our team there. And with that, I will we want to go to the next slide, I will introduce some of the folks on the call with us. So I have Emily Fernandez, our Chief Schools Officer. And we also have Ricky Cohen, our Special Education Coordinator. Ricky Cohen also a long time ago had the opportunity to work in pre-K, and she is our coach for our pre-K teachers, and our member of the leadership team is really taking the lead there. I'm going to give her a moment to introduce herself, but I know you are most eager to actually hear from our pre-K teachers themselves. And so if we could go to our next slide, I'm so excited to introduce Miss Alia and Miss Tracy. And Miss Alia, if you want to take yourself off mute and introduce yourself to our families in our community, and then you can pass it right over to Miss Tracy.
Hi, I am Miss Alia. This will be the start of another awesome year at Harlem Hebrew, and I'm super excited to be working with pre-K.
Thank you, Miss Alia. Miss Tracy, do you want to take yourself off mute and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to pre-K. It's so nice to see everyone here. Wishing that we were in person, but a little bit about me. I have worked in early childhood for almost 16 years now, most of them with 3 and 4 year olds, but 2 years with kindergartners. My role is a teacher's assistant to help out with Miss Alia with everything in her, with lesson plans and setting up the room on a daily basis. But most of all, I feel my biggest role will be to love and support you and your children, especially during this time, which is a different type of year for myself included. But I know that I believe that Miss Alia and myself, we will find that path that we need to keep you and your children supported, healthy, happy, safe. And we are looking forward to this year with excitement, and we are looking forward to get back to school, see your children, and we can't wait to see their smiles. And just thank you for joining us tonight, and we can't wait to meet you in person, actually, or on Zoom.
Thank you, Tracy. Thank you, Alia. And I will just say both Tracy and Alia are valued members of our Harlem Hebrew community. They're both returning to the school this year. And last year, while they both have experience across various early grades, just last year they were both in kindergarten. And so they have a really clear vision of where our kids can go and how we can get them there. And also, they've had some experience with the Zoom with the little ones. And so they're really prepared to do, even for our remote kiddos, to do some amazing things. And both of them are being led by the amazing Miss Ricky, who is our special education coordinator I mentioned earlier. Miss Ricky, do you want to take yourself off mute and just introduce yourself?
Thanks, Miss Emily. So as Miss Emily shared, I am the special education coordinator at Harlem. This is my second year in this role, and prior to this role, I was a second grade teacher at Harlem Hebrew. And like Miss Emily mentioned earlier, before coming to Harlem Hebrew, I was a pre-K teacher for a few years using the UPK curriculum. So I am super excited to jump back in and support the little ones and support Miss Tracy and Miss Alia, and I'm just so excited to learn and grow with your students.
Amazing. Miss Ricky, thank you so much. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Emily Fernandez, our Chief Schools Officer, who's going to talk a little bit more about Hebrew Public and our mission and goals.
Thank you so much. And I'm just so excited for the little children who are going to be working with these two wonderful educators. As I hear you talk about pre-K, I have myself a little son who's 3 years old, and I just, it's exactly what I would want from the educators who would be working with him, to hear both of you talk about, and Ricky, about your kids and your future this year. So my name is Emily Fernandez. I'm delighted to be here tonight to support our school team with just sharing a little bit more information about what pre-K looks like at Harlem Hebrew this year. As the Chief Schools Officer, I work with senior leadership at Hebrew Public to determine, long-term strategy or programmatic policy for the network. And I also work very closely with Miss Emily and all of our heads of schools around their individual school management. We have our mission here, and our mission is dear to us. I'll just read it very briefly. So Hebrew Public Schools are leading a national movement of exceptional, diverse public charter schools that teach modern Hebrew to children of all backgrounds and prepare them to be global citizens. I really think the aspect of diversity and global citizens and global citizenship is so important at any point, and even more so now. And so even in these unique, challenging times, we do want to focus on bringing folks together and building community and family. And I think it starts with our youngest, right? It starts with your little kiddos who are joining us for pre-K. An aspect of our mission and values that is kind of unspoken here, but is the number one priority always, is to keep our students and our families and our staff safe and healthy. And I think in this moment, that's true in a different way. So we're not going to talk quite as much about our traditional mission and values, proposal. We're going to talk more about the tactical plans for your students' education and joy and social emotional learning, and then the tactical plans for your students' health, because that's really top of mind for us right now as we plan for this year. So we'll go to the next slide. As we, excuse my background sound, oh, just a moment. So as we look at next year, I want to talk briefly about our academic planning, and then I'm really going to turn it to Miss Emily Carson and Miss Ricky to take us in a deep dive. So this year, we had thought we would only be able to offer 2 days for our folks who wanted their kids to come in person for instruction. And after reviewing our survey results and our various options, it's clear that we're able to now offer 4. Certainly for Q1, and we hope that that continues. But for Q1, and you'll hear more about this, for any of our pre-K families who opted for in-person instruction in the building, they will be able to come in Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. And we just think like that consistency is going to be absolutely wonderful for kids, for our teachers, just in terms of the growth that we can make. Similarly, for our students who choose 100% remote, because we did also offer that option, you're going to be able to have live touch points with our teachers every day in 2 1-hour segments. So they're going to take you through that schedule more concretely, but I think that that's going to be really helpful to maintain that connection, even if your child is not coming into the building. And so I'll hand it over to Ms. Emily and Ms. Ricky. We can go to the next slide to take a deeper look at what it looks like to be in person and what it looks like to be 100% remote and learning from home.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. So in person, big picture, our goal is to have small groups that are able to social distance in the classroom. And we were able to really thoughtfully, with Miss Tracy and with Miss Alia, figure out how to actually use 2 different classrooms so we can take this small group and really spread our kiddos out, so that we can really maximize social distancing and safety. We are also really excited to use those 2 rooms because we're going to really limit the movement across the building to limit exposure. You know, we don't want our little ones around many other kids, and we want to be really thoughtful about their safety. We will have across the school slightly shorter hours to account for safe, socially distant arrival and dismissal, and also supporting our remote students, because while arrival is happening, Miss Alia and Miss Tracy are going to be doing some tag teaming and getting to work with our remote students. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. And we also, our focus is really around social emotional learning and academic inquiry based learning prioritized, excuse me. And you sort of heard people, you hear often referenced in the city, the UPK, which is the Universal Pre-K Curriculum. And this curriculum is really thoughtful around building amazing learners that are curious, that are future global citizens, if not global citizens already by the end of the year. And so we're really excited to emphasize that through social emotional learning and play and fun and lots of joy. If we could go to our next slide. Really concretely, what this is going to look like, our arrival is going to start at 8:45, and we're going to do a whole town hall just about arrival and dismissal as we get closer to our first in-person days. And you can see here on the schedule, our schedule highlights morning meeting, centers, gross motor play, lunch, and cleanup. We're going to have read aloud. We'll have rest time, more centers, and kids are really going to get to explore. And Alia and Tracy have really been spending a lot of time very thoughtfully planning, how can we do centers in a socially distanced and safe way? How can we make sure that we're taking our cleaning of the classroom up to like a whole other level? I know they have some exciting things about hand washing that they're going to prep with kiddos and make it, you know, a joyful experience, so that we can be safe and have fun doing it. And if we can go to our next slide. On the other hand, we have some kiddos who are going to be in remote learning, and Emily kind of previewed this a little bit, and so I'll go a little bit more in depth. There is going to be some live, synchronous, real-time instruction provided on Zoom. We will have morning meeting and activities from 8:15 to 9:15, and then afternoon meeting and activities from 12:20 to 1:20. Additionally, we are excited to provide families with a structured schedule to use as a resource, along with weekly activity guidance and learning materials. And we have some online platforms that we're going to provide you with, and some social emotional learning and academic inquiry. And we're going to be actively reaching out to communicate with you around those things. Now, I do want to highlight that we're providing these as a resource, and we want to really partner with you and support you. But we also know that it is likely, the odds are not high that you are a teacher at home with your kids. And so we want to make sure, we know things come up during the day, and families have different needs, and schedules can change. Listen, and we do understand. We really want to provide resources, and we want to provide supports as we work together to make sure even our kids who are not in the building with us are able to learn and feel connected and part of our community, and also their parents and families feel really supported in doing so, because we know that that can feel hard. And I'll show you just what that schedule can look like if we can go to the next slide. So here is sort of, you'll see from 8:15 to 9:15 is our Zoom time where we're all together, and 12:20 to 1:20 is our Zoom time where we're all together. We wanted to be really thoughtful about limiting Zoom time, and also, limiting the logging in and out for you as families, but to make sure that we prioritized when that time is together, we're doing fun activities, art, and learning with resources that we'll send home, and provide you with some other resources with your kiddos throughout the day. And if we could go to just our next slide. Oh, thank you. We're here. I want to highlight, and just a moment, I'm going to pass it over to Emily Fernandez to talk really in depth about our health and safety for our in-school learning. And even our remote folks, if you're remote right now, we hope that you'll be in the building with us soon. We can't anticipate what's going to happen in the world, but we do hope we are all together in person soon. That is our goal. And I want to say, learning is important to us. Global citizenship is important to us. Loving your kids and creating a beautiful community is important to us, but we cannot do anything unless every member of our community is safe, and our kids are safe, our adults are safe, the adults our kids interact with when they go home, our older siblings are safe. And I cannot begin to say how important this is to me, but when you're here with us in our community, you are ours, and we want to make sure that our kids have everything they need, and that you as adults have everything you need, particularly around safety. And I just couldn't highlight that enough. And with that, I'll pass it over to Emily Fernandez to go into the details there.
Great. Yeah. Thank you, Emily. And, I kind of touched on this in the beginning, but we know, like, when it comes to priorities, the first is health and safety, and then we can build everything on top of that. And so I am going to go through some of the protocols and steps we've been taking to address health and safety as we reopen our building to staff and then to students on September 21st. And, as Emily noted, this is particularly relevant to our students who are coming in the building starting September 21st, but we also want to make sure it's available information for everyone, so that as you start to evaluate your options, and at some point we hopefully will be returning all together, you have this reference in mind of the steps we're taking. So I'm going to start with some of the guiding principles that we've used at the network to really approach this at all of our schools. Much of this is going to look familiar, and really I am just standing on the work of my colleague Jonathan Worley, our Chief Operating Officer, who with our network staff at the schools and our operations staff at the schools and the network have built this out. The first is social distancing, right? We all know this from anytime you go into a store or anywhere else, the goal of being 6 feet from each other and not being in each other's personal space to reduce exposure. The second, personal protective equipment. So the most common one I think that we all have made part of our way of life is the mask. And I can say, again, as the mother of a 3-year-old who went to a day camp a few weeks ago, and he was not very good at wearing his mask beforehand, that, within a day or so, he didn't want to take his mask off at the end of the day. We had to remind him to take it off when we got together and home together. So we are going to be working with our kids to wear their masks. We know it's something we're going to teach them. It is new. They are young. And we also know that this is something that we're going to rest on your partnership with. And if you're sending your child into school, that you're talking with them, you're teaching them about wearing masks and the importance of putting it on and keeping it on. So we'll have that. We'll also be doing health screening for all individuals who come into the building, where all staff and all students complete a very simple form every morning via an app that we'll be sharing with families of, do you have any symptoms? Have you had any exposure? And if yes, we'll ask that you stay home. And if not, we'll ask that you come in to start your day. And along with that, everyone who enters the building is going to do a no contact temperature check prior to entering the building, students and staff, or at a minimum within the first 10 minutes of being inside the building if we have students come in for inclement weather or anything along those lines. But we're doing health screening every day to make sure that we can kind of check where people's health are and give directives, along that in response. Cleaning and disinfection. We always want to keep our schools clean, but certainly starting as early as February, this took on a different meaning for us. So we have invested in increased teams to do daily and multiple times throughout the day cleaning. We also have invested in some technology, some equipment that has like high power rapid disinfecting spray to disinfect and clean supplies, materials in classrooms. We know that this is one of our top things that we can do to prevent spread. And so in addition to hand washing and hand sanitizing, which we'll be doing aggressively throughout the day for students and staff, we're also looking at cleaning and disinfecting materials and items, especially high contact spaces like doorways and railings. Environmental management, so we'll talk a bit about that in the next slide, but the idea of our air quality, right? And what we can actually do to manage our environment to be as safe and clean as possible, and purifying the air as much as possible. And then batching, and this is the idea that the students who come to school will be in one small batch. They will not be interacting with students from other grades or teachers from other grades. Even if, let's say, someone has a sibling in the 4th grade and the 4th grade teacher in a normal year would pop down to visit the pre-K younger sibling and say hello at some point during the day, just that beautiful love. We're not going to be doing that. We're asking, if you don't teach pre-K, if you're not with this small batch, you don't really have contact with them throughout the day, so that your children are exposed to the least number of individuals possible. That's really our overall goal. Next slide. So a little bit of deeper dive on this, right? And you can kind of read through this as I go over it. So for the social distancing, in addition to the 6 foot, there's some specific things we're doing. So we're really looking at arrival and dismissal to see how we can spread folks out as much as possible. It is a puzzle. We're going to need your partnership, but we're looking at that, right? Because that's a time when everyone is in one area, has the potential to be. We're also doing things like signage throughout the building, floor stickers, right, that are 6 feet apart and cheerful, and remind our kiddos and our staff to keep that space. For the personal protective equipment, again, everyone will be wearing a mask, so our students and our staff as well. We're always going to have extra PPE on site. We've done a significant amount of ordering, and although I'm sure everyone's heard about the backlogs of various things, this is one of the places where we were able to secure all of that, and we have stuff already in the building, even though we won't have students in the building until September 21st. Hygiene kits, so cleaning materials and basic hygiene kits for classrooms. Hand sanitizer stations, we're putting these in throughout the building so that, as you're passing through, if someone does step into a pre-K classroom for a reason, to check on the teacher or anything else, they can hand sanitize before going back out. In terms of screening, so again, you'll see the second item here is the daily symptom screening questionnaire that everyone will be doing. We also are asking that all staff be tested prior to the first day of live instruction. And so all of our staff are doing that. As we speak, many of us have already gotten our results, but we're making sure that any staff member who's going to be in the building takes and completes and gets results for a COVID-19 test. And again, the no contact temperature checks, which I think, has become part of our life to one degree or another. So cleaning, just again, what we were talking about there, the idea of high touch traffic areas, absolutely. This new disinfecting equipment is fascinating, just does a quick spray and has a rapid result. I could use that at home. And then also making cleaning part of our culture. So, I think it's one of the things that we would do anyway, have kids help tidy the classroom, put toys away, gather up debris, but making that even more of a norm of, we just ate lunch, we wipe down with the disinfectant wipes, or we just finished centers, we do a disinfectant wipe together before we move on. So making that part of the culture. The last one here of environmental management, I briefly touched on, but we are completing an engineering review with an outside company, DBI, of our air quality, of our HVAC systems, and we're adjusting our protocols accordingly. We are purchasing air sanitation equipment. So these are some of the like technical ways that we're looking at our environment. But we're also just the very basic way of, we know that fresh air is one of the best ways to keep air flowing and keep air, changed out and fresh throughout the day. So whenever possible, we're going to ask that classroom windows are open. We'll be mindful of weather, and we're certainly not going to expose your children to unsafe or uncomfortable environment, but where possible, we're going to try to have outside air flowing in. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I think that one of the things that has come up for us as we've planned for this return is just what would happen on the health and safety front if someone did test positive. And we know that that is a risk, and we are taking every step to try to avoid it. But we have begun, or rather laid out plans, contingency plans, if that is the case. So the really step one, if we become aware that a student or staff member has had a positive test for COVID, we would immediately notify the City Department of Health and comply with their directives. So that might look like a single class switching to remote learning for a quarantine period. It might look like a hallway or a section of the building where exposure has been affected by someone who tested positive. It may even look like the entire school. And that we don't have control over. All we can do is work with the Department of Health, work with you all, our families, communicate it as quickly as possible, and make sure we have contingency plans so that if a class had to switch into remote learning, we would have a plan. And so for our pre-K families, what that would mean is, rather than coming into the building 4 days a week, if the Department of Health gave us a direction to quarantine, then our pre-K students would be at home, and they would immediately engage in the remote learning structure so that there wasn't a gap, and they'd be able to participate in the live classes and just continue to have that touch point. But really, we're going to go by health officials. We've all become, much more familiar with health and safety protocols than we were, 6 months ago, unfortunately, but we also don't think that we are the experts. And so if we end up in this situation, we will go to the experts and follow their directives, and we will communicate with you. Okay, next slide. So what comes next? The one thing we know is that we have to be prepared for uncertainty. We could have a situation where a student or staff member tests positive, right? And there's a partial or full closure. That's a possibility. There could be a surge in the virus, right? Where our overall positive test rates or infection rates as a city, as a borough, as a state, require us to close schools and, through governmental order, or even if we were identifying a rate or a percentage rate that was significantly high, we felt that that was the step we had to do. And at some point, there will be some good news, and we will be able to open our doors in a safe way to even more students. The reality is, we don't know which of these uncertainties will happen next. And so our approach is just that we're going to be prepared for all of this, and we're going to communicate with you and partner with you so that you know what is happening across our schools. So with this, I'm going to switch over back to Miss Emily, just to take us through some questions you all might have for us. Emily, I'll give it to you.
Yeah, thank you. So, we have covered a lot of information today. We have also shared a lot of updates in the last week. And so we're going to move into more of like a frequently asked questions session and try to cover a number of the questions that have come to us from families in the past few days. And so, I also am going to name, if you have any questions, you can put them directly into into the chat box. And we will probably not be able to answer right away, but what we will do is collect those questions. If they have not already been covered in today's session, we will make sure that we respond. So if you put something in the chat, please also share your name so we can make sure that we follow up with you. And if any questions can be answered in the moment, we will absolutely do so. So, I want to share first, one of the questions is just like, how do you plan to keep students and staff safe and well? And it really always warms my heart when families also ask about our staff as well. And it shows what a true Harlem Hebrew Together community you are. And I'm going to pass it over to Emily to respond here.
Yeah, thank you. And so much of this I just touched on in the health and safety section. But again, we really are working as closely as possible with governmental officials, with health organizations, the CDC guidelines, as well as even talking with our partner schools across the city. So our friends at the DOE, our friends at other charter networks, and focusing on these preventive measures. We know that we may at some point have to be reactive in the case of a positive test for one of our community members. What we are focused on now, in addition to those contingency plans, are all the preventive things we can do. And so there's a bunch that, we went over before that we're a bunch of steps that we're taking. And in terms of families, we would just ask that you partner with us in the mask wearing and supporting your kiddos. We will be partnering with them for sure, but these are the proactive things that we're hoping to do to prevent anyone from being ill.
Yeah, thank you so much, Emily. And if you could go to our next slide, a question that has come up, and I know Emily has already touched on it a little bit, is this idea of like, how are we going to reinforce mask wearing and social distancing with children? What if children refuse? And what I would say, my gut reaction is, we are educators and we are teachers, and it's our job to teach and to educate, and that means, in an ideal world, it just means the fun things, but it also means, in this new world that we're living in, it also means mask wearing. And so for us, we are really approaching mask wearing and social distancing as something that we actively teach our students. And just like if students are having trouble with a lesson in class, we think thoughtfully about how do we take in that data and we address it and reteach it and support. And it means, like Emily has said, like really partnering with families and being in constant communication about what has worked and what hasn't, and what have you done at home and that we can learn from, and here, by the way, is what we're doing at school, and just us really being a partner together, which is important always, and definitely important now. And that brings us to one of our other questions that's sort of connected, is what does behavioral and student culture support look like for students during this time? And the first thing I will say is, we are really, as a team, grounding ourselves in the planning for trauma responsive practices and leaning really heavily on responsive classroom, which is a behavior culture model with schools that really focuses on kids and teaching and joy, and this idea that it's actually not about what happens when kids misbehave. It's what do we do to create a beautiful culture where we can all learn. And so we have spent a lot of time as a school and as a community practicing and getting ready, and even our teachers this week are practicing lessons for the first few days of school because they want to be their best selves with our kiddos. And on top of that, when there is something reactive, we do have a full culture support team at our school to coach our teachers and to support students, and to ensure that everybody has access to the learning and the joy that's in the building. And this next question here that we've gotten a few times is, how often will students and staff wash or sanitize their hands during the day? And I'm going to pass it over to Emily Fernandez to answer this one.
Great. So for our staff, we've really emphasized like as much as possible. If they have a prep, if they're transitioning at any point, if they have a down moment, washing their hands with soap and water. Hand sanitizers, as we said, every classroom will have a station where students and staff can sanitize their hands, as well as other places throughout the building. And so certainly when any staff are coming in or out of a classroom, part of the process will be to sanitize your hands, walk around the classroom, and sanitize to go back out. I'll say this around our students, and we shared some sample schedules earlier, and what is built into the last 10 minutes of any of those segments, right? So centers, if centers is an hour long, the last 10 minutes is a hand washing and cleanup routine. Our gross motor play is a 40-minute block. The last 10 minutes is cleanup and hand washing. So we are really, particularly for our youngest kids with the bathrooms right there, going to emphasize hand washing multiple points throughout the day, teaching it. It is a skill. And so we're really going to just build on it, like Emily said, the way we would with any other skill that we need during this time.
And our next question here around, will the buildings, classrooms, desks, objects that kiddos and staff come across be disinfected every day? And I'm going to pass this one back to Emily Fernandez.
Great. So absolutely, all of these items will be sanitized every day. At night, we've got an intensive disinfectant for every surface. With a real specialized equipment that I mentioned earlier that I think is fascinating. But we also have cleaning crews, enhanced cleaning crews in the building throughout the day, so that even before the end of the school day, we're getting cleaning throughout the day. The one other piece I'll say is that, for our pre-K students, they're coming in 4 days a week, but that Wednesday, it really is going to be a day largely of teacher planning, preparation, making sure everything is in place to run these kind of two models, these two programs with our one wonderful set of teachers. And while it's less folks in the building, right, while it's just our adults there planning for these various models, we're also going to enhance our cleaning on Wednesdays so that we get an extra burst midweek. To just maintain the disinfecting throughout the week.
Emily, I'll let you take this question as well. What are we doing about air quality and ventilation?
Yep. So step one, we're assessing our HVAC system. We're doing that full audit, all right? And we're actually testing our air quality with an outside company that we've partnered with for several years. Second is air sanitizing equipment. I didn't even know this was a tool, but we are sanitizing our air. And then the third is this idea of fresh air and having windows open wherever possible to freshen the air with outside air throughout the day.
And this, we've gotten some questions about arrival and dismissal and how's pickup and drop off going to look. And we have some pre-K families who are returning to our community. We have some folks who are new, and if you are not new, you might remember that last year our arrival and dismissal, we had pretty locked down to 10 minutes, which is pretty amazing to see that many kids not only enter the building, but particularly for our older kids, make it all the way up to the 5th and 6th floor in such a short amount of time. But we were able to do that because kids could get a bit closer together. And it started with a hug or a high five from myself or someone else on our leadership team. And so we've had to take some of those things about our arrival and dismissal, and we've had to make some adaptations. And so the first I would highlight is always when we're thinking about arrival and dismissal, our number one priority is always safety. We're in a city. And our kids are coming to us. Some kids are walking. Some kids are taking the train. Some kids are taking the bus. Some families are dropping kids off. Some kids are taking the school bus. And so kids' safety on being able to physically get into the building has always been our number one priority in arrival and dismissal. And now we're thinking about safety in a different way. We're keeping all of those same priorities as before, and we're adding on this layer of social distancing. And so what that is going to look like in detail is going to come in, we're going to have a family meeting as a whole school just about arrival and dismissal. But what I would say is it's going to take much longer. We have whole 45 minutes blocked out for it. And we're gonna give some times for families of, we could encourage you to come at this time or this time, but we also recognize a lot of our families have siblings across multiple grades in the school. And so we don't want to say kindergarten come at this time, second grade come at this time, and then have families just sort of standing and waiting around. But generally what I will say is that families and students will be expected to follow social distancing and health and safety measures, which means that we're gonna have some lines, and we're gonna have some things marked, and we're gonna have a whole lot of signage. And it also means that it's gonna take longer. And we are gonna ask that you have patience and grace with us, and we're all learning this together, and we want to, our priority is really just keeping each other safe and keeping our community safe. And so we thank you in advance for your support as we tweak this, and we'll be looking for feedback on how to make it better. But our goal really is safety. The other thing I would just highlight, in previous years in grades pre-K through first grade, our families have actually walked kids to class, and it has always, and they've and kids in pre-K through fourth grade, families picked kids up from their classroom. And this has actually been one of our highlights, because families have gotten to see where learning has happened. Families have gotten to interact with the teacher like really, really closely if they pick up their kids or drop them off. And unfortunately, that is something that we have to stop this year. And this is it's not because we don't love you and we don't want to see you. It's actually because for our safety and the safety of all our kids in our building. So kids will be dropped off at the entrance to the school. And again, we'll go into more detail later, but you can expect that there will be lots of staff helping kids get to their room. We know with the little ones, they need a little extra help getting up the stairs. They need a little extra help taking off their book bags, taking off their coats when it gets a little colder. And we are going to we are committed to finding ways that we can still connect and have those joyful moments, even when we're apart from each other, and even when folks can't just walk up to the classroom. So more coming. It was a long explanation to say more coming. So this next question has been, well, what if I select the fully remote learning option and then I change my mind? How can I then opt to in-person learning option? And we understand that we're all going to be learning things about what is the right choice for our family. Unfortunately, at this time, we cannot accommodate switches from the remote to the hybrid during the first marking period. And that is really just about safety and setting up Miss Alia and Miss Tracy for success in ensuring that they can make sure every single kid who is in the building is safe. And we've really, really carefully assigned classes and made the schedule and space and staff requirements around the number of students that we have that have selected into the in-person learning. Now, that being said, if families want to move from in-person to remote, you can do that at any time. Additionally, in October, we're going to be asking you again as we move to the second marking quarter, which do you prefer? And you'll have that option to change your mind, and we will adjust our schedule and our supports accordingly. And this next question here is, I'm going to pass over to Emily Fernandez around visitors and family members being allowed in the building. I touched on it a little bit for arrival, but Emily, if you could just take it away here.
Great. So we are not going to be allowing really anyone that doesn't have to be in the building. And so, I talked about our air quality audit that we've been working on and that we're going to continue to monitor our air quality over the course of the year. The folks who we're partnering with, they're going to come into the building, right? That being said, we're not going to have, maybe as many guest speakers. We often had folks come in and read with our classes or do a presentation. We're going to do that via Zoom right now. We're not going to have folks come into the building if they do not have to come. And so that goes for our family members, right? As well as for other outside visitors. I will say that, again, I'm both presenting as an educator here and also a mother. And I know that it is unsettling to think about not being able to go into the space where my 3, 4, 5-year-old child is. Please know that if we are in an emergency situation, we will get you to your child and make sure you have that connection. But largely outside of that, for the safety of everyone, we are not going to. And so that is just one of the things that we're working with accepting. We're going to work with what it looks like to say goodbye to family, you know, in the morning. We're going to practice that like routine, even in our virtual classes, those first 2 weeks, because remember, everyone will be 100% remote virtual for the first 2 weeks, and we'll start in person on September 21st. And we'll talk about arrival, talk about, you know, what does it look like to say goodbye to so-and-so who brought you to school, and, you know, come on inside and be welcomed by your teachers. But we are not going to be allowing anyone who doesn't have to be in the building into the building for the safety of everyone involved.
Thank you so much, Emily. And with that, that sort of brought us to the end of our frequently asked questions. And we haven't had any newer questions than these in our chat. But I just want to say thank you so much for attending tonight. We will be sending out the recording of this as well if you want to reference anything. And if you have any additional questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to info@hebrewpublic.org, and you can expect a timely response from our team. It is so important that we are working together, and we are only able to work together and support each other if you have all the information that you need from us. And I know Miss Alia and Miss Tracy and Miss Ricky and myself and all of the network team are really excited to be able to work with you and to be able to work with your kids, and we just can't wait to meet them, honestly, either virtually or in person. And so if you have any questions, please reach out. And again, thank you so much for attending, and this recording will go out.